Hello, here I am back again with another Boris Red tutorial, mainly for Edius users. Before I get into the tutorial proper, I'd like to give you some of the historical facts behind the reason for this tutorial. Before I began using Edius, I had used Avid Media Composer for many years, and when I started with Media Composer, I used to use the Avid version of Boris Red. In those days, both applications were 32-bit, and I still have a 32-bit version of Boris Red here. If I open this and go to the track here to the far right where I can change the track media, you see I can choose a movie file. And when I look at the different formats I can use, you see there's quite a choice, and over there you can see there are two versions of Quicktime movies available. This was very useful to me because I had a Canon DSLR camera that I sometimes captured video with, and the format there was Quicktime. So I could use those Quicktime files directly in Boris Red. Unfortunately, for PC users, when Media Composer upgraded to 64-bit and Boris Red followed along with a 64-bit version, Apple didn't see fit to update QuickTime for the PC to 64-bit. And because of that, let me open the 64-bit version here. On the PC, when you went to import a movie, all you had were AVI and MPEG. There was no longer any QuickTime. After the initial shock, I looked around and I found that if I used TMPEG encoder, I could re-encode my Canon files to AVI files. But I felt there was a quality loss when I did that. After looking around the internet, I got a tip that maybe I should look at the Grass Valley Canopus HQ and HQX codecs, which were available as a free download. I went ahead and did that, and I found I could produce good quality AVI files that Boris Red would accept. Then I switched from Media Composer and moved up to Edius. When I came to Edius, I was very happy to find that Edius worked mainly with AVI files. Avid Media Composer relies heavily on the use of QuickTime. And also Edius, of course, had the Canopus HQ and HQX codecs in the application. I could capture from tape directly to an AVI HQ or HQX codec, as well as being able to render in Edius to the AVI file format. And it's this possibility that I want to show you more about in this tutorial. Here I am in Edius with one VA track, and on that one video track I have an effect done in Boris Red which has 19 video tracks. And I'm able to do this because Edius can create AVI files which can be used in Boris Red. One day when I was out driving this summer, I had to drive through a series of 23 tunnels, and in the home video I was making, I wanted to show this in a 2-minute sequence, so I turned to Boris Red. All of the clips I had were QuickTime clips, and as I explained, now in the PC 64-bit version of Boris Red, it's not possible to bring in the QuickTime files. But here in Edius, it's very easy to prepare AVI files for this purpose. This is the first clip. I have it on the timeline. I scrub through so I can find the place where I want the AVI file to begin from. I think around here is fine. So I mark an in point, I want each PIP to be 12 seconds long. So I now use the plus and enter 1200, enter, and O for out. So now I have a 12-second long clip here. Let me drag on this window, which shows the project folder for this project. If you look down here, you can see the actual project folder. When I start the render now, I want you to keep your eye on what happens just below the project folder. Shift and G to start the render, and immediately a folder was created called rendered. And as soon as the render has finished, we'll take a look inside this folder. Here you can see a sound file and the AVI video file of the rendered area. Now, the naming of the file, which is done by Edius, is not very easy to remember or read. So I'm going to change this to 01 tunnel, because this is the first tunnel. The PC version of Boris Red doesn't use audio, but just to keep things organized, I'll change this to the same name. And I go back to Edius. I continue to prepare the remaining 16 PIP files. I'll select another clip, onto the timeline, back home, and scrub through until I find an appropriate place. This time I want me coming out of the tunnel. I'll start around here. I for in, plus 1200, O for out, render, Shift G. And now I'm rendering the second clip into my render folder, which I will rename to 02 and some name. Then I continue selecting 12-second areas from my Quicktime files and rendering them as AVI files. In Edius, I have placed a clip that's going to play in the background as the PIP effect happens. It's on the V8 track. Once I have it there, I go to my Effect palette, find my Boris Red button, and drag it down onto the video track. And then I can launch Boris Red. Anytime I open Boris Red, I always check two things. I check that my cursor is at the start of the timeline, and I also check that this key here is on a grey background, not a red background like that. When you have the red background selected, it's known as the record mode, and any changes you make to the composition will result in the creation of keyframes. Something like in the layouter, but in the layouter I think it's a very useful feature. In Boris Red I prefer to switch off this type of function because I like to have total control over what keyframes I create, where I create them and what values they have. So I'd recommend to switch it off. Deselect the background video track by clicking down here under the track. Hold down Ctrl and press K to make a new video track. Move along to where you can change the track media here. Click and select Movie File. This is the folder in which I have all the AVI files I prepared in advance. And you'll recognize the first one, 01 Tunnel, so I'll select it. The name of that clip is automatically placed here. Now the effect is only going to be 12 seconds long. I go to the last keyframe, and if you look here under key, you'll see that the keyframe is at 2 minutes, 6 seconds, 14 frames. I want it to be at 12 seconds. Click, enter 1200, enter. And now I have this 12-second long piece on my timeline. I'll expand the timeline a little so we can see clearer. At the first keyframe, I want my PIP to be small and down in the right-hand corner. And I can do that by just grabbing here. Oh, by the way, if you don't see this outline, go down here to toggle on-screen controls and select shape. This is known as the shape around here. Continue making it smaller, and then I'll move it down into the corner. When the cursor reaches the 8-second mark, I want the PIP to be full size on the screen. That means that from here I need to change the interpolation for scale from constant to linear, and I need to change the interpolation for position X to linear and position Y to linear. Now I move to the 8-second mark, and I can do that quickly and easily by clicking on time, enter 800, then Control N to make a keyframe here. And at this point I want the image to be centered and full size. If I go up to position X and Y, click here on the cross and it will automatically center the image. Then go down to scale X and change it to 100. Y will follow along, so now I have it full screen. And because I had the interpolation as linear, I have this movement here. From here, I want the position to remain on hold. Position here on hold and the scale on hold. At the 9-second mark, let's go there, 900, make a keyframe. I want the whole image to start fading out. So on opacity, I change the interpolation to linear, move to the last keyframe, and change the value of opacity to 0. And we have the fade out. I have now created the first PIP. I have 16 more to create, but that is a very simple task in Boris Red. I'll resize the timeline just now so you can see what's going to happen. With the first PIP selected, all I have to do is hold down Control and press D 16 times. And now I have 17 tracks. The only problem is that they all have the same media here, but it's a very simple process now to select the next track, go to Movie File, select the second clip, go to the third track, Movie File, select the third clip, and so on until everything is ready with its media. And there we are, we're ready with that part. I'll resize this again a little, like this. At the moment, all the PIPs are appearing at the same position on the timeline, and in fact I want to have them staggered across the timeline. Normally when I want to adjust so many clips, I take a moment to write down the numbers that are going to be involved. And this is a table that I made showing me at which position each of the PIPs should start to appear. You can see the first PIP should start at 0. The next PIP should start at 7 seconds. And this is how I would go about moving this to the 7-second mark. Click on the last keyframe. Hold down Shift and click on the first keyframe. Go up to Key and enter 700. And when you press Enter, the whole line moves to the 7-second mark. Then you go to the next one, click on the last one, Shift, first one, Key, and on the table you can see 1400. and I continue all the way through the 17 clips until they are spaced out on the timeline. Luckily I have a microwave here, so let me stick this in the oven and get it done quickly. There we are. Bring this down here a bit, and when you begin, you happily see this appearing, but then things get disappointing because suddenly nothing's happening. Let's explain what's going on here. Go down to the first PIP. If I twirl down in the PIP track here, you can see under the face track there's this thicker part and then a thinner part of the timeline. The thick part is actually the video clip, and the video clip stops here. If I move up to the second track and twirl down, you can see the second track is here, but the video clip for it is still beginning from 0. And even worse, if I go to, let's say, up here to the 6th track, which is here, the video clip is over here, so it's not actually showing. And this is the only part in this effect which is a little boring. I have to drag these clips into position under the track. For example, here, if I click and mark this, I need to drag the video along so that it fits in under here. If you look at the bottom right corner of the composite window, when I move this, you can see it appears and disappears. So when it just appears, that's where I want it. And I would have to go through tracks 2 to 16 and make sure this is correct. And now that I've slid all the media into the correct position on the timeline, if I scrub through, you'll see the effect is taking place. To keep things neat and tidy, I would first select the top track, scroll down, hold down Shift, and click on the bottom video track, the background track. So now all tracks are selected. Then go up here to the Add Container button, click. And if I go back up again, you'll see there's now a container here with all the tracks inside. So now I can just collapse this and everything is neat and tidy. I need one other thing, and that is the route map. First I make a new track, Control K, and change the media to an image file. This is the map I'm using here. Move my cursor to the start of the timeline and move the map into position, resize it and set it up ready for the drawing of the route. And at this point I'm going to make you very disappointed because I'm not actually going to show you me drawing the route. That's another day in another tutorial. Once I had everything ready, including the route map, I would go up to File, down to Save Project Copy to Library Browser, and save the project file in a folder. I had already saved this one and I've called it 17 to MC. You'll see why in a moment. Once that's done, I can apply this and go back to Edius. Back in Edius, I render this. And you can see it's going to take about 13 minutes. And in actual fact, when it gets to 50%, it's usually finished. So I'm expecting this to take 7 minutes to render, which isn't bad considering the amount of video tracks included. Now we're nearing the 50% mark. We're actually on 7 minutes 45 seconds at the moment, so it looks like it's going to take about 8 minutes instead of the first calculated 13-14 minutes. There it goes. And we can play this back and see how it looks. Well, with that it should be finished, but I want to show you one small thing that you get as a bonus, especially if, like me, you occasionally go back to Media Composer. I have made this in Edius, and I've done that because of the ease of creating the AVI files, which I then use in Boris Red. I saved this to the library browser. Media Composer also works together with Boris Red. I'm going to now go over to Media Composer and show you how easy it is to use the same project file in Media Composer. And I only have to import one clip into Media Composer, and that's the one I use as the background. All of the ones used in the effects will still have links to the original position I have them in now. Over to Media Composer. And here in Media Composer, in a completely new project, the only file I have brought in is the Quicktime file I use as the background for the effect. So I'll open that and I'll put it onto the timeline, get the Boris filter and drop it onto the video track. Open the effect editor, launch Boris. Delete both video tracks. Go to the library browser, look for the correct folder, and here is the 17 to MC red project file. I'm going to double click on it and watch how quickly the effect actually comes into MC. It's there already. Apart from the background file, which I did bring into MC, all of the other files, the PIP files and the map, are still in my Edius folder. They haven't been imported into MC itself. They're still external, but they're here. I can apply this. And there you see we have the effect in MC. Of course I'll still have to render it, but that's another story. With that, I am going to close this rather long tutorial. I hope it has opened some eyes. For my own part, I must say I was really very happy when I found that Edius could easily create these AVI files which I can use as media in Boris Red. And with that, I'll say bye for now.